What about getting ready for the audio by going back and listening to Peter Sellers in the movies that are cited in There Used to Be a Me? Um, you know, the characters from I'm All Right, Jack, Fred Kite, and I looked at obviously the Pink Panther movies. I also checked out on YouTube. There's YouTube's this great resource for actors. You know, when it comes to researching, you know, roles and other actors, it's a fan. You know, and there's like tons and tons of clips, obviously, of Peter Sellers from movies, from interviews, and it's interesting. The interviews were just as useful as watching the clips from the movies, because you know, given that the premise of There Used to Be a Me is essentially that Peter Sellers, in a sense, only existed in the context of these wonderful characters that he created. That when he was that's what people fell in love with. They fell in love with the Peter Sellers that was in the movies. And by his own admission, he talks about, you know, being kind of almost characterless when he was outside of those roles. So hearing him talking, there's a lovely, I mean, obviously the famous one is the extended interview that he did with Michael Parkinson, where he actually pulled out, you know, he pulled out the ukulele and sang that sweet little kind of song. And there was something terribly sad, I thought, now in retrospect, after knowing so much more about him than I did when I first saw the interview back in the 70s, when I was, you know, just a very, very young actor myself. Just kind of the sadness of it, the sense of, in a way, a life not lived authentically, but lived through the prism of all the work he's done and the characters that he was infamous for and famous for. And this notion that everywhere he went, when people realized who it was, they were just waiting for a version of that. They were waiting for him to burst into Clouseau. They were waiting for him to burst into, you know, doing voices from the Goons. And there was this kind of weird juxtaposition within him of kind of reveling in that and hating it at the same time. You know, sort of needing the celebrity and the recognition and the adulation, but at the same time hating it because it was such an imposition and such an invasion of privacy. So, you know, I thought that was all very, and I thought there's got to be a way of finding that without doing an impersonation, without kind of slavishly trying to copy his voice. Think more in terms of the tone and the intention of what he's saying. You know, so when, like in that opening moment in There Used to Be a Me, when he's talking to himself in the mirror, getting ready for the day, that was quite revealing, because I remember talking to you about it before we started actually recording it, that I remember saying, well, do you want me or do you want my version of Peter, or you know, what are we trying to, you know? And I thought, well, you know, does the reflection have a different voice to, you know, and all that? And I remember you saying, no, it's a man talking to himself, and whatever answers he gets, that's him talking to himself as well. So, you know, and all that kind of stuff is really, really fascinating for an actor, because once you find the link, once you find the way in, then everything's up for grabs. You know, everything's there, everything's available to you. I always used to think, and I always used to pride myself on this, that I always used to say, no, I'm not one of those actors that takes the work home. You know, I put in my shift, and when it's done, I'm done. I leave. You know, then I come back and put it all on again the next morning. And I think that was me sort of hanging on to some kind of pride in thinking of what I do as just work. You know, I've always got my father's voice in my head. You know, I think I told you that story about, you know, when he asked me how much I was complaining about an acting job, and he asked me, you know, are they paying you? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, shut up. And so I always think, no, I don't take my work home. But a couple of times people in my life have said, actually, Fred, no, that's not true. You do tend to bring some of it home with you.
Yeah.
And I think that's almost unavoidable. And it's not that you're behaving like the character. It's not like, if you're playing a murderous kind of villain during the day, you're not coming home and sort of beating everybody up and extorting money from your neighbors. It's not like you're doing that. But certainly, I think traits of the character stay with you. And I don't think it's that you're living the character outside of work. It's just that there's a level of preoccupation with the character or with the work that stays with you. So when you finish a day's work, you're already thinking about tomorrow's day's work.
Yeah.
As you're on your way home and at home having your tea, or falling asleep reading a book, there's a part of your brain that's thinking, preoccupied, worrying about what's going to happen the next day. And so I suppose to that degree, I think we all bring it home with us. And there have been times when I've played roles where there's a certain darkness to it, or a certain kind of something a bit sort of under the surface, and I find myself carrying a little bit of that, but not because it's affecting me, because it's not because it's turning me into a loony or anything like that. It's just a preoccupation with what's required for the job.
Yeah.
Just from watching a great actor doing great work, it's got to be Dr. Strangelove. Just the range of those characters, from the president to the Secretary of State to the RAF officer. And there was one other part apparently that he ended up couldn't do, or refused to do. There was another role that was up for him to play, and there's a kind of, you watch that movie and you kind of go, there's one actor there doing such different things that you can't help but kind of go, I bow to you. That's acting on a whole other level. On a personal level, the film that always kind of triggers warm, fuzzy feelings is I'm All Right, Jack. Because I think that was a brilliant creation. Fred Kite was a brilliant creation. And just for shits and giggles, the first Pink Panther that he did, A Shot in the Dark, I still think is the best one. Just in terms of the character was so beautifully, Clouseau became less and less subtle as the movies went on, and by the last film, it was just really, it was so broad and so kind of out of context. It just didn't work for me at all. But The Shot in the Dark and then the Pink Panther, there are moments of absolutely inspired physical comedy that I don't think could, the thing with the big globe, that gag with the globe. The gag with they called me the Pavlova of the parallel bars. So, those sort of gags. Looking at the little mound of dust in the museum and with his magnifying glass and the glass falling out. I mean, just fucking genius. These are strokes of genius. That and that's the kind of talent I'm envious of. The kind of talent that's going to come up with, and you know what, Blake, let me try something. You come up with stuff like that. I mean, that's got to earn you a seat in heaven, isn't it? Hi, I'm Alfred Molina, and I hope you enjoy listening to There Used to Be a Me.